If only it were that easy to scrub away the transphobes. Not the transphobes, transphobia. That sounds like I want to kill people. Hey Spurs, it's Jamie. How's it going? Welcome back to another video. I don't know, but welcome either way. And today's going to be an interesting one. We are reading an article called How the Gay Rights Movement Radicalized and Lost Its Way. And when you see a title like that, you always know it's gonna be good, and you just know there's like a 95% chance it's gonna be thinly veiled transphobia. Quite a long read, so buckle up for this one. Buckle up. And because I know that videos like this can be stressful, I thought I'd introduce you all to a lovely little routine of mine that can help you relax and help stop that stress from prematurely aging you. Because only the bigots deserve that. Yeah. I have a lovely little affiliate link with the wonderful Horace, a personal grooming and skincare brand that is for all men. That is their goal, to be for all men. They offer simple, efficient, and natural grooming products and are all about what men actually want and need, and not about living up to some kind of unattainable masculine ideal. It's totally acceptable for men to use skincare, okay? So today I'm walking you through my skincare routine, partly to keep the youthful trans man glow alive, and partly to wash off the haters. Step 1, under eye patches. These ones specifically. These ones are anti-fatigue, so perfect for dealing with the bags you may get after one too many doom scrolling sessions. It happens to all of us. They moisturize, depuff, and basically trick the world into thinking you got a full 8 hours of sleep even if you didn't. Spoiler, I didn't. But you really should be doing that too, getting the sleep. Ta-da! So these stay on for 15 minutes, and during that time I'm going to walk you through the rest of my skincare routine to keep away the wrinkles from the bigots. I cannot smile too much right now. Now, the real MVP of skincare to me personally is a moisturizer SPF combo, because you should moisturize and you really should wear SPF. It's very important. But before we moisturize, we cleanse. Not our souls, our faces. Enter Horace's Purifying Face Cleanser. This gently purifies your skin without pulling or drying. If only it were that easy to scrub away transphobia. Next up, hyaluronic acid and panthenol serum. Easier to apply than it is to pronounce, and it actually works. It prevents dehydration, smooth lines, and if you stick with it, after 4 weeks your skin will be softer and more supple. Basically the closest thing to a time machine in a bottle. And finally, moisturizer, and my ride or die Horace's moisturizer SPF 2-in-1. One of the only acceptable 2-in-1s when it comes to beauty products. Typically they come up in pointlessly gendered, and it's like 5-in-1 for men, where it does everything and cleans your car. But this one moisturizes and protects your face from the sun. It hydrates, protects you from UV, and politely tells premature aging to back off. It's like skincare with boundaries. And that's it. A really simple 3-step routine. No sticky residue, no film on your face, and no immediate urge to scrub everything off immediately after you've applied it, which is how I feel about most skincare products. Genuinely, Horace is hands down one of the only products that I actually enjoy using. So if you're after some new skincare recommendations, maybe you've just started testosterone. Maybe you're trying to fight off some early wrinkles. Or maybe you just want your skin to feel nice. You want to do something nice for yourself. We all deserve that. Whatever your reason, you should go check out my link in the description box. Full disclosure, it is an affiliate link, which means for every purchase you make through that link, I earn a little bit of money. It's like a moisturizer SPF 2-in-1 combo, but where the 2-for-1 is you get a great deal, and I get to keep making videos. Yay. Thanks for listening, and now that my eye bags are reduced, my skin's hydrated, and I am glowing, I think I'm prepared to face the chaos that is going to be today's video. Are you ready to? Let's go. I'm just gonna take these off first. I'll be right back.
A few moments later.
Right, the article. How the Gay Rights Movement Radicalized and Lost Its Way. It's an opinion guest essay piece in the New York Times. The problem is though, when these guest essays pieces, they're there as opinion pieces, but people do not always take them as opinion. They take them for truth, for facts, for solid. They read what this person is sharing in terms of their opinion, and they're like,
ah yeah, no, that's definitely right. The evidence is here because this other person has said it.
And this is where things get a bit difficult. So we're going to read through this article together and just call some bullshit on it. It is quite long. We might not read every single bit of it because apparently it's 25 minutes if you want to listen to it, and we've got to talk about it as well. So I'm really glad that I moisturized. Let's go. 10 years ago Thursday, the movement for gay and lesbian equality scored a victory that only a decade before had seemed unimaginable. We won equal rights to civil marriage in every state in the country. I'm assuming that that is about the US, because gay marriage was legalized in 2015. In 2020 came another stunning win in a majority opinion written by one of President Trump's nominees, Justice Neil Gorsuch. The Supreme Court found that gay men, lesbians, and transgender men and women are covered under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and protected from employer discrimination. Right. Great. It took until 2020 for that to happen. I mean, yay for it being a thing, but wow, why so late? Like, sometimes I'm baffled to think that in the USA, gay marriage has only been legal for a decade. A decade. And in the UK, it was only a couple years longer. And guess what's happening? The Supreme Court have been asked to overturn gay marriage in the US. Oh my God. Maybe that's going to come up here. In 2024, the Republican Party removed opposition to marriage equality from its platform, and the current Republican Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is a married gay man with 2 children. Sometimes I'm very confused how people can be part of a political party or work under a particular president when they are a certain marginalized group themselves. It just doesn't always compute. Gays for Trump, LGBTQ plus people for Trump just very much feels like immigrants for Farage. It's that vibe.
Because it is not adding up to me either.
Gay marriage is backed by around 70% of Americans, and discrimination against gay men, lesbians, and transgender people is opposed by 80%. As civil rights victories go, it doesn't get more decisive or comprehensive than this. Okay. But a funny thing happened in the wake of these triumphs. Far from celebrating victory, defending the gains, and staying vigilant by winding down as a movement that had achieved its core objectives, including the end of HIV in the United States as an unstoppable plague, gay and lesbian rights groups did the opposite. Swayed by the broader liberal shift to the social justice left, they radicalized. Progression with HIV was not made without people being loud about it. Progression with gay marriage and gay rights generally were not made without people being loud about it, without people pushing the boundaries for at the time what was socially acceptable. It didn't happen without people from different groups or groups with more rights going,
Why can't you just be quiet? Why can't you just be happy with what you've got?
and that's what this feels like. This feels like it's been written by a cis gay man, probably a cis white gay man, who's gone,
Well, no, I feel like everything I needed was achieved. Why are people still pushing for more?
it's very bizarre because this is the kind of thing that was said about the gay rights movement like 20 years ago. Like,
Why can't you just be stop? Be quiet. No more. You got enough, didn't you?
and it's like, okay, there's some progress made over here, but there's still progress to make over here, and then there's a lot of progress to make over here. So as a community, people are still coming together and being like, hello, equal rights is still something that we all deserve in this world. Thank you. In 2023, the Human Rights Campaign, the largest gay, lesbian, and transgender civil rights group in the country, declared a state of emergency for gay men, lesbians, and transgender people, the first time in the organization's existence. It had not declared a state of emergency when gay men were jailed for having sex in private, when the AIDS epidemic killed hundreds of thousands of gay men, or when we faced a possible constitutional amendment banning marriage equality in 2004. In fact, we found out this emergency was almost entirely in response to new state bills proposing restrictions on medical treatment for minors with gender dysphoria, bathroom and locker room bans, and transgender issues in school curriculums and sports. That reads very much like,
Oh, I feel like they didn't fully have my back 20 years ago, so how dare they have the back of another marginalized community now?
and just because the issues faced by trans people and the issues that the Human Rights Campaign have called out in 2023 don't impact a certain group of people in the LGBTQ plus community does not mean that they don't deserve to be called out, right? Yeah? It's just like,
Oh, well, because I got the rights I feel like I wanted, people in my community, you all need to shut up. Stop asking for more.
that's just weird behavior.
You know, it is so weird.
And it's also weird behavior to blame other people who are part of the marginalized community that you're in, other people who are LGBTQ plus, for bigots and right-wingers being like,
Oh no, you're asking for too much now, you're being too loud, we're going to start taking things away, we're going to start punishing you.
that is not the fault of the people who just want their equal rights. That is the fault of the bigots. We should not be fighting with each other. We should be pointing at who the real villains are over here, you know, where they've just gone, look,
Over there.
and they're trying to create infighting. It's working quite well, actually. This article being a prime example. Because what we're seeing with trans people and these restrictions on treatment, one, when you say like medical treatment for minors with gender dysphoria, people who are not trans allies and trans supportive and understanding of the trans community always love to paint the gender affirmative approach for trans youth as some kind of medical conveyor belt of like,
Young kids are getting hormones and having surgeries.
no, they're not. There is a huge amount of assessment, and that's even if they are lucky enough to have accepting enough parents to allow them to speak to a specialist medical professional. And funnily enough, the specialist medical professional typically knows knows a lot more about what they're talking about than person writing an opinion piece. Then if they do get to see this professional, it's a lot of hoops to jump through. It's a lot of talking. That's what this mostly is. Talking therapy, allowing kids to explore their expression, allowing them to go by a different name and pronouns if that's what makes them feel comfortable, and just exploring who they are. That's what it is. When they reach the age that puberty typically starts to set in for them and their peers, they may, in a very small number of instances, be able to access puberty blockers. And it is that thing that is being heavily restricted, when actually it is part of the gender affirmative approach, and it leads to improved well-being amongst trans youth who get access to that care. And then in terms of like bathroom and locker room bans, that is very much a push to minimize trans people's presence in social life and pushing trans people out of social life and putting trans people in harm's way. And then school curriculum and sport is again a way to minimize trans people's participation in wider society, and wider society being given the tools to not be bigots and learn about what it means to be trans when they're growing up, so that they can just be an open-minded person to those around them. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal that trans people are being pushed out of public life and refused appropriate medical care. Nonetheless, the money has poured into gay, lesbian and transgender groups in the past decade. Charitable funding for such groups totaled $387 million in 2012, according to the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy's Equitable Giving Lab. That is a long title. By 2021, it was $823 million. LGBTQ organizations also saw their assets grow 76% from 2019 to 2021, around double the size of their increase in donations. Is that not a good thing? That's a good thing, right? We're seeing more funding going into LGBTQ plus causes. And like, when you think about it, if we're thinking about the States and all of the money knocking around the United States of America, and where all of this funding goes and where all these other charitable donations go, in a 10-year period, $450 million is a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of money, it's not the biggest amount. I'm just saying everything needs to be looked at in proportion and context. A group like GLAAD, founded in 1985 to combat anti-gay media bias in the depths of the AIDS epidemic, saw its funding increase sixfold between 2014 and 2023. The Human Rights Campaign has also seen revenue soar in the past decade. Amazing. That's good. Yeah? Are we going to celebrate this? But, oh, you know when there's a but, it's not good. But this huge increase in funding was no longer primarily about gay, lesbian and transgender civil rights, because almost all had already been won. Because almost all had already been won. I feel like that kind of statement is coming from a place of privilege. We're not playing Oppression Olympics, but within the LGBTQ plus communities, there are identities that have more rights and more privilege than others. So a gay, white, cis man would have more equal opportunity in the world and life than a lesbian, or than a black gay man, or than a transgender person. So you might feel that almost all had already been won, but like almost all, that's still not equal rights, is it? There'll still be things that LGBTQ plus people are discriminated on against or not protected against that cis straight people are. So therefore, why would we just stop because some people in the community have enough rights now? Yeah, it's enough. So we don't need any more. We don't need to protect these other people in the acronym, you know? It was instead about a new and radical gender revolution, focused on ending what activists saw as the oppression of the sex binary, which some critical gender and queer theorists associated with white supremacy. They aimed to dissolve natural distinctions between men and women in society, to replace biological sex with gender identity in the law and culture, and to redefine homosexuality in the process. Not as a neutral fact of the human condition, but as a liberating ideological queerness, which is then meant to subvert and queer language, culture, and society in myriad ways. I'm tired reading that. So things like the sex binary and like gender stereotypes and this very specific view that is had on sexuality and gender and expression is also a very westernized thing. If you look across different cultures, there's been a lot more variation throughout history, even when you go back to ancient times. I'm talking like before the Common Era times, there's evidence of people who were outside of what we today see as like a gender binary and typical gender expression. So like, what are they dissolving? Like more modern day gender views and expectations. But also, this is such a a fake argument that we see coming out of transphobic camps typically of like,
Oh, these trans activists, they want to like get rid of this word and these languages and they want to eradicate this thing and they don't give a shit about that thing about you.
it's just a tactic that I've seen so many people use, and I don't know if this is being used here intentionally or unintentionally, if somebody's genuinely absorbed this thinking it's true. It's a tactic I've seen used time and time again to try and pose the trans community as a threat that completely wants to dismantle society as we know it today. Like natural distinctions between men and women in society, to replace biological sex with gender identity in the law and culture, is just such a silly thing. It's like, yes, trans people deserve equal rights and trans people deserve to live and be protected and respected as our genders and not forced to live a lie and not forced to live as our assigned sex, which is not who we truly are. But it's not trying to say that sex doesn't exist and gender identity is the only thing. It's acknowledging that the two exist but are separate from one another, and for some people they can be different. For trans people, they are two different things. And then in terms of redefining homosexuality, it's just trying to acknowledge that me, a trans man, if I were to be in a relationship with a man, that man would not be straight. He is in a relationship with a man. Like, just because I'm not a cis man, no straight guy is going to look at me and go,
Yes, I want to be with that person over there.
that doesn't happen. Lesbians don't look at me and go,
Yes, I find him really attractive.
It's just so bizarre to me. The words gay and lesbian all but disappeared. LGBT became LGBTQ, then LGBTQ+, and more letters and characters kept being added. LGBTQIA+, or 2S LGBTQIA+, to include intersex, asexual people, and two-spirit indigenous people. Just because more people are being acknowledged in an acronym does not mean that the literal two first letters that are still very much there are not being paid attention to. Does not mean they are being removed or disappeared. The words gay and lesbian all but disappeared because LGBT became LGBTQ+. Like, the longest acronym I ever actually see people use is LGBTQ+. Even if people use 2S LGBTQIA+, who gives a shit? You're still in there. Like, everybody's in there. What about the people who haven't been included for the longest time? Rights are not pie. We can all have our rights, okay? We don't take away from each other. And if people start thinking that we're taking away from each other, they're the ones who are trying to take away. The plus sign referred to a seemingly infinite number of new niche identities and, by some counts, more than 70 new genders. Honestly, I have no idea. I do not know. I do not care. I'm not sat here going,
Oh, but the T used to be like the end of the acronym. Everybody knew it ended with T and we got some attention, and now it goes QIA+. What the hell? The T is getting lost in the noise. You only pay attention to the beginning and the end.
like, that is the level of silly that this argument sounds like. So what? Other people have identities. Who gives a shit? So what? They're not the same as yours. So what? You don't understand it. So what? You think there's too many. So what? You think it's made up. I don't care, because I've never actually come across somebody in real life who identifies as some like new niche made up identity that these people would refer to as such. It's such a uncommon thing, really, but it's being blown out of proportion to be like,
Everybody's doing it.
but like, the people who are identifying that way, what impact are they having on your life? And if you think it's their fault that the alt-right and bigots are being loudly transphobic and homophobic, then you are greatly misguided, because it's not the fault of somebody who has X identity. It is the fault of bigots. They're the ones driving this. And even if there weren't 70 new genders that you can pick on Facebook, I don't know where introduced it, but even if that didn't exist, even if the acronym was still LGBT, they would still find something to push back against. So you just buying into their arguments of why they are being bigoted is just helping their bigotry. The point was that this is all one revolutionary intersectional community of gender diverse people and intertwined with other left causes, from Black Lives Matter to Queers for Palestine. We are stronger together. They needed a new banner for that, so the rainbow flag, invented back in 1978 at the request of Harvey Milk, was replaced over the last few years by a new progress flag representing intersectional oppression. Black and brown stripes were added to the rainbow for black and brown people and the people lost during the AIDS crisis, and pink, light blue and white for trans people. That flag now demarcates, I don't know what that means, not simply a place friendly to all types of people as the old rainbow flag did, but a place where anyone who does not subscribe to intersectional left ideology is unwelcome. Honestly, I see such a mix of flags being used. However you feel about the flag, it's questioning why so many people felt like it was important to have one that more loudly represented the more marginalized people within the LGBTQ+ community, than to start being like, ugh. You might not like it aesthetically. I personally had issues with it because it then felt like there was a rainbow flag out there that could be used by transphobic people, by racist people, by deliberately rejecting the one that was supposed to include LGBTQ plus people of color or trans people, it felt like an active choice to not use that and therefore exclude the more marginalized groups within the LGBTQ plus community. So I had qualms with it. But if you're seeing it as anything but there were people out there who felt like it was necessary, there's a difference between being one of the people that was then meant to be represented more boldly in this flag and having some questions and reservations about it, but more so about how it meant other people could use the original rainbow flag, which actually isn't even the original rainbow flag. Some colors were removed over the years because of, I think it was to do with printing the colors. So like it's not even on its first iteration, it has changed. But if you're not part of those communities represented, I think it's really important to step back and be like, why am I having such an issue with this? I think that's just an important message for this whole piece, really. Queer was a way of summing up the new regime. Oh, it's these words, like it's where people are like describing the trans community as like a cult and that kind of, so like saying regime and saying things like gender ideology as well. A clear sign that this really was a different movement from the gay, lesbian and transgender civil rights movement of the past. But really, what progress was made for trans people specifically, where it wasn't just kind of like tapped onto the end of gay and lesbian rights, which are, yes, really important. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is there's a reason why there became this louder pushback specifically for other members of the LGBTQ plus community who had been included in some of the progress made in the past, but there was still so much more progress to be made and that needed to be made. So it's not just like, oh yeah, we're done here. The more had to be done, okay? It's a word that can easily trigger gay men over 40 who remember it as the last slur they once heard before being bashed in the head. But one of the striking aspects of members of the younger queer generation is their disdain for those who came before them. I think people have a problem when those who came before are now echoing the bigotry that would have been used against them. Is when there are cis gay people who 20, 30 years ago would have had the exact same types of discrimination said to them that's now being said against trans people, and they are now doing that as well. There are so many transphobic gay people. It's not disdain for an age, it's disdain for people where they're part of a community that should be coming together, but instead of coming together, they decided to punch down. That's where the disdain comes from. In terms of the word queer, if that is something that you are not comfortable with, then you do not have to use it. It is something that many, many people have reclaimed of all different ages. It's like some trans people frequently use and have reclaimed for themselves the T slur and use it a lot. That is something that I do not like using for myself or using myself, but I don't mind if other trans people have reclaimed that and they're taking power from it. Good for them. I am happy for them in a very non-sarcastic way, in a very sincere way. I just don't want to do it for myself, but I'm not going to write some article where I'm like,
oh yes, the T slur was said to me in this really like traumatic event that when I think back on, like upsets me and causes hurt. So therefore I'm mad at anybody who's decided to reclaim it.
It's just no. As I watched all this radical change, I wondered if I was just another old fart shaking my fist at the sky like every other older generation known to man. Nearly some self-awareness.
So close.
Why not just accept that the next gay and lesbian generation has new ideas and has moved on, and old timers like me should just move aside? Very, very close. But it's not like you don't have to move aside. You don't need to get out the way. You don't need to disappear. You just need to listen to how the world has changed, because it's not just within the context of LGBTQ plus people. It's within the context of the world. Like language has changed and our understanding of science and medicine and lots of other things have changed as well. And things evolve and we learn that some things aren't okay to do anymore and other things are okay, and we move with the times. That's what it is. It's not about stepping aside and living in the olden days and not paying any attention to what's going on and not getting involved. It's about listening and it's about learning, because the way that we made progress 20, 30 years ago was from other generations and other people listening and not moving aside and ignoring, but listening and then moving forward with those groups. And some of the changes are indeed welcome. The greater acceptance of trans people is a huge step forward for all of us. That's come out of the blue with the rest of the way this has been written. But then, as I told my friends, gay, trans and everyone else, I'd always believed this and always supported trans civil rights. I was glad when 5 years ago the Supreme Court gave transgender people civil rights protection in employment. I've also long lived in a gay world that is skewed left, and along with my fellow gay non-lefties, I've made my peace with it, or tried to. So it's okay if you deem it to be an acceptable level of rights for this group, but when it goes beyond what you think is okay, that's when it's problematic. But this new ideology, ding ding, ideology, regime, same ideology. But with this new ideology, I believed was different. Like many gays and lesbians and a majority of everybody else, I simply didn't buy it. Actually, lesbians are, aside from trans people themselves, the most accepting group of the trans community. It's like 97% of lesbians accept the trans community. And cis gay men are still more accepting of the trans community than cis straight people. So it's not like many gays and lesbians, I simply didn't buy it. That you didn't buy the current fight for trans rights, because for you, they felt too far. For you, person who is not trans rights that are currently being fought for, that's too much. Because you've already got your rights. So is this coming from a place of fear that if trans people push too much that you'll lose yours? Because that's not trans people's faults. The fight for equal rights when you're part of a marginalized group never stops. I didn't and don't believe that being a man or a woman has nothing to do with biology. You're saying that you were pleased that trans people gained some rights 5 years ago, but then you're saying that you think that being a man or a woman is in our biology. And I'm assuming by that he means our assigned sex. That has to influence whether we're a man or a woman, which that just makes it sound like you don't think trans people are their gender. Which then makes me think, oh, okay, so whilst trans people were quiet and palatable, and you could pretend that they just didn't exist, and it's like,
oh yeah, like I know there are these people who like think they're a different gender to the one they actually are and all of this bullshit, but like they don't bother me, like they're just over in the corner being all quiet and oppressed.
but as soon as trans people started getting a voice, it's like,
Oh my god, no, I don't agree with this.
I'm not saying that's what's happening, but that's what it feels like. My sexual orientation is based on a biological distinction between men and women. I'm attracted to the former and not the latter, and now I'm supposed to believe the difference doesn't exist. So attraction boils down to chromosomes, which is like the only thing that trans people cannot change. Trans men can have a penis. Trans women can have a vagina. Trans men and trans women can have pretty much all the primary and secondary sex characteristics of their gender identity. Like I said earlier, I would not expect a straight man or a lesbian to find me attractive. And that's because me being a man and my appearance and the way I'm perceived in this world and the people finding me attractive or not is not based on my chromosomes, nor is it based on what's in my pants, because people don't see that. They don't see me walking down the street. I do not go walk around naked in the street. I have also had lower surgery though, personally, but for trans men who haven't or trans women who haven't, some people may prioritize genitals more than others with sexual orientation, but that doesn't mean that you need to then not see a trans man as a man or a trans woman as a woman. You can just acknowledge that there is something about that individual that you personally do not find as attractive, but you don't need to invalidate or disrespect who they are in the process of that. There are plenty of gay men who date and find trans men attractive. There are plenty of cis lesbians who date and find trans women attractive. There are plenty of straight men who date and find trans women attractive, and plenty of straight women who date and find trans men attractive. Genitals are not as important for everybody, but regardless of their importance to you, it's all about how you respect that trans person and their identities. Because what this sounds like is,
No, I just wouldn't find a trans man attractive because there's a biological distinction between men and women, and I find men attractive.
which just sounds like a roundabout way of saying that you don't see trans men as men or trans women as women. I'm more than happy to accept that there are some people, more than happy to accept, not all that many, who don't fit in that binary and want to be protected from discrimination and allowed full access to medical intervention in order to live lives that are true to who they are. And I'm with them all the way. After all, I too am part of a minority. Most people live their lives governed by heterosexual desires. Thanks to the gay and lesbian movement, I'm not being asked to. Yeah, but a movement that was seen as radical 20 years ago. Like, there are parallels in how the fight for trans rights is being described in this article to how the gay rights movement was described a couple decades ago. It's really confusing to read these articles and hear the words of people who are almost like desperately trying to be like, oh no, like my true feelings are this, and then they're not great and they're like quite phobic or bigoted, but they're kind of trying to fluff it up a bit with being like, here I am disrespecting people, but I don't want to disrespect them. It doesn't go together. So it's like, I'm more than happy to accept that there are some people, not all that many, who don't fit in that binary and want to be protected from discrimination and allowed full access to medical interventions in order to live lives that are true to who they are. But you're admitting that there's not all that many. There isn't. There has been an increase in trans people seeking gender affirming care that That's just the correlation we also saw in left-handedness. As soon as something becomes spoken about, more understood and less discriminated against, we see an increase in people identifying in that way. What we saw is in the early to mid 2010s, there was this big increase in trans representation in media, like just trans people having a bit more of a voice, making a little bit more progress. And we started to gradually see this increase that grew and grew of trans people figuring out who the they are, because it's not a simple thing. And of course, when something becomes more spoken about and more people realize that describes who they are, it doesn't make them that thing, it just gives them the language to know who they are. You're going to see more people identifying as that way. I feel like a lot of people have gone, oh no, because 20 years ago it was this number of people and now it's this number of people, I'll only accept this number of people actually being trans. But anybody who goes over that limit,
No, you're not really trans because you don't fit into the quota from like 30 years ago.
but abolishing the sex binary for the entire society, who is doing that? Literally who? Oh, hello, equal rights for trans people, please. And then it goes through some filter and reconfiguration, and these people here like,
We hate everybody and we want to dismantle society as we know it, and sex doesn't exist and trans people are the masters of the universe.
I mean, maybe things would be going a little bit better if we were. That's a whole other thing entirely. And madness, I believe. What if I redefined what it is to be heterosexual and imposed it on straight people, or changed what it means to be a man or a woman for that matter? Did a trans man want to date you? Did something like that happen? Because this is so bizarre. You do not have to date trans people if you don't want to. Trans people are not trying to abolish the sex binary or tell people what their sexual orientation is. All trans people are saying is like, hey, trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are non-binary. If you are a cis gay man, you could potentially find a trans man attractive. Because guess what? You've probably come across so many trans men, or at least maybe a trans man. I don't know, because we're still not that common. You've probably come across a trans man at some point in your life and you've possibly found him attractive. Maybe that was online, seeing a photo and not realizing he was trans. Because funnily enough, attraction doesn't just come down to chromosomes. It may then be that once you find out that person is trans, and depending on the stage of their transition, you may not wish to enter any kind of relation with them or be intimate with them. That's fine. That is your prerogative, but you still would have found them attractive because they're still a man. So like what he's saying is trans people are trying to impose what it means to be homosexual onto gay people, which is just the most straw man, weak ass argument. Then it ceases to be accommodation of a minority and becomes a society-wide revolution, an overreach that would soon lead to a potent and sane backlash against not just trans people, but gay men and lesbians as well. That feels like the crux. It's like,
I don't want to be told who I find attractive.
nobody's telling you who you find attractive. And then also, hey, look, I'm safe in my bubble. I feel very secure in my bubble. I got all the rights I wanted. I got all the rights that me in this position within the community that I felt like I personally needed. Shut up before you ruin my rights. But why is that the fault of the people still trying to fight for equality? It's not their fault if your rights get impacted by bigots. It's the bigots' fault. Again, it's the bigots' fault. Why are trans people being blamed? The gay rights movement, especially in the marriage years, had long asked for simple liberal equality and mutual respect. Live and let live. Reform, not revolution. Gay rights did not come about because people asked politely. No. Why do so many people do this? There's so many cis gay people who are like, trans people, you're being too loud. Trans people, you need to ask softly. Trans people, your rights will come if you're just more polite and you respect the people who are disrespecting you. What? That's not how we made the progress we've made so far for the community. Just sitting in a chair politely waiting. Stupid.
Stupidest thing I ever heard.
No one straight marriage would change if gay marriage arrived, we pledged. You can bring up your children however you like. We will leave you alone. We will leave your children alone. This should have had like a bigot bingo. You know, like a regime, ideology, look out for your children.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
People didn't believe that though. There's big fear over children being corrupted and harmed by gay people. If gay people were to get equal rights was a big thing because it's all recycled bigotry. Everything we're seeing said towards the trans community right now, you swap out a few words and it's what was said about the gay community. But in the wake of victory, LGBTQ groups reneged on that pledge. They demanded that the entire society change in a fundamental way so that the sex binary no longer counted. This is so repetitive. Elementary school children were taught that being a boy or a girl might not have anything to do with their bodies, and that their parents had merely guessed whether they were a boy or a girl when they were born. The brain and the genitals develop at different times in the womb. There's a theory that exposure to different levels of hormones can lead to people being trans. Clearly, there is something that leads to people being trans. Twin studies do show a genetic link. There is onset from very early age that shows not a nurture but a nature thing going on, and there is evidence from rhesus monkeys that testosterone at certain times of fetal development does lead to differences in those baby monkeys that are long lasting. Anyway, so your assigned sex does not need to correlate with your gender identity. What's wrong with teaching kids that trans people exist? In fact, sex was no longer to be recognized at birth. It was now merely assigned, penciled in. We got new terms like chest feeding for breastfeeding and birthing parent for mother. Those terms are used when it is relevant. They are used to make trans people feel like they are able to access certain elements of healthcare and speak about their needs as trans people. They would not be used if a cis woman were to go in. They're not going to call her a birthing parent. They will refer to her as a mother. It's just like gender neutral pronouns being an option. It doesn't mean you have to use them. It doesn't mean people are going to use them for you. It means that they are there for the people that need them. A key leader of this movement, Chase Strangio, informed us that a penis is not a male body part. It's just an unusual body part for a woman. It's a body part that typically is had by men, but the existence of trans men, the existence of trans women, the existence of the fact that your gender identity can be different to your assigned birth sex means that inherently having a penis does not make you a man. We were all suddenly expected to announce our pronouns as if everyone didn't already know. There are gender non-conforming cis people where people do not know their pronouns. Cis people also get misgendered. Like, just sharing pronouns and how you want to be referred to, you don't have to do it, but it is not a wrong thing to do. It is not a weird thing to do. It is not a wholly unnecessary thing for cis people to always do. It's also a really great way to show that you are an ally. Then neo-pronouns, ze, them, were added. The movement came up with a mantra: trans women are women, trans men are men. 'Tis the truth. It was not an argument or a proposition to be explored or debated. It was a theological command in all caps. See, like, posing trans people as angry is another thing that would be on the bingo card. Posing trans people as being a scary, monolithic, argumentative, awful community. I feel like this would be very different if, like, frame it as if we went back 20 years or 30 years and being gay, just the existence of being gay, whether people could actually be gay or not, was put up for debate on national television all over the place. And there was a saying, I don't know, gay men are gay. Gay men are attracted to men. Get over it. Kind of thing, right? That isn't something that should be debated. That is part of nature. That is part of how people are. And that's an element of somebody that does not impact a bigot's life at all. It's very bizarre to think that somebody's gender identity or sexual orientation has any impact on you whatsoever. It's kind of weird, kind of self-absorbed to think that you have anything to do with that person's identity, or that person's identity has any impact on you. You're not that special. It's like if people were like, the sky is blue, and somebody being like,
This isn't being said as like a conversational thing that we can have a debate over. You won't listen to any other argument.
it's because it's fact. That's why. Was there any debate among gays and lesbians about this profound change? A vote taken or even a poll of gay men and lesbians? None that I can find or recall. Why do you think as cis gay people, you have a say on the identity of trans people? It's like saying, oh, you didn't run it past us. What? It's none of your business. I really don't get that paragraph. That is ridiculous. This guy does not speak for the whole community. As I said, cis LGBT people are way more likely to be trans accepting than cis straight people. And as other social justice spaces, dissent was equated with bigotry. Dissenters from gender ideology are routinely unfriended, shunned, and shamed. Well, I don't want to be friends with a bigot. Almost all of the gay men, trans people, and lesbians who have confided in me that they don't agree with this or think that J.K. Rowling and Martina Navratilova have some good points have said so sotto voce, lest anyone overhear. Okay, the pick-me trans people. Do I believe that this guy actually knows trans people who have said that they agree with J.K. Rowling? No. There's a couple of them on YouTube. That's not the only questionable part of their views. This little community used to champion all manner of expression or argument or speech, eccentrics and visionaries. Now it's fearful, self-censored and extremely uptight. Debate has been all but snuffed out. Total uniformity of thought is demanded. I don't give a shit what you think. I just really don't think that people who know nothing about the trans community community are not trans themselves and have nothing but shit, wrong things to say because they don't know the facts of the matter should be weighing in on crappy opinion pieces about the trans community, and nor should they be doing things that impact the trans community's rights. Why is it your place? But this illiberalism made a fateful strategic mistake. In the gay rights movement, there had always been an unspoken golden rule: leave children out of it. Oh, what? And that's why gay people being called groomers became such a big thing. The trans people are not making kids trans, just like gay people were never making kids gay. The trans community are not hurting kids, just like the gay community weren't hurting kids. But it was still a homophobic rhetoric that gay men in particular were groomers and were gonna hurt kids, and that kids learning that gay people could exist was gonna force them into being gay and make all the kids gay. I don't know where this has come from. Must be some kind of deep cognitive dissonance. We knew very well that any overreach there could provoke the most ancient blood libel against us, that we groom and abused kids. Literally, that is what gay people were accused of, are still accused of. Like, groomer is one of the most thrown about shitty words against the LGBTQ plus community, including towards cis gay people. You can bring up your children however you like. We promised we will leave you alone. We will leave your children alone. But all the bigots threw a massive hissy fit because kids started learning that gay people existed before they started learning that trans people existed. Things like Section 28 in the UK were overturned. So what did the gender revolutionaries go and do? They focused almost entirely on children and minors, partly because the adult issues had been resolved or close to it, and partly because true cultural revolutions start with the young. It meant overhauling the education not only of children with gender dysphoria, but of every other kid as well. I really needed those eye patches. It's because bigots decided that using children as pawns in this political game against the trans community was the best way to get people on side. Because it's like, they're coming for your kids. It's instilling that fear in people. And we did see this with the gay rights movement as well. Right-wing and bigoted politicians politicized kids and said,
this marginalized group is coming after your children.
And this is not an exclusive tactic that's been done against the trans community only. And funnily enough, just like people are born gay, people are born trans. So yes, there are trans kids. And yes, trans people are going to want to protect those trans kids because trans adults know what it's like to be a trans kid who is not supported, who is not allowed to transition, who doesn't have the access to transition, who doesn't have the language for how they're feeling, who has to watch themselves go through the wrong puberty and see and feel that gender dysphoria and that self-hatred grow, and see the hardship faced by having to reverse that irreversible thing that just happened to their body. And to reverse it is incredibly difficult, not just in terms of access, but also then you have to have more surgery. It's just ridiculous. Trans people are the last people who would want anybody to live as a gender they're not. Kids all over the country were affected. Your children were taught in elementary school that being a boy or a girl was something they could choose and change at will. No, because trans people would never say you can choose and change your gender. It's just saying that you can be trans, that some people, a very tiny percentage of the population, like 1%, are trans, and that's okay. Your daughter found herself running against a trans girl, i.e. a biological male, in athletics. Oh yes, your 7-year-old. I was playing football on an all-boys team as a 7-year-old kid who was assigned female at birth. It didn't make a shit of difference. Children in elementary school got to pick pronouns, and some children socially transitioned at school without their parents' knowledge or permission. Oh goody, children having a safe space away from probably bigoted parents. I suppose there are other ways you can resurrect the ghost of Anita Bryant and all that homophobic paranoia that followed her, but this will probably do the trick. Anita Bryant jump scare? Well, we have J.K. Rowling, who is the transphobic version of Anita Bryant. And then the most radical of all, gender-affirming care for minors, which can lead to irreversible sex changes for children. The care included off-label blockers to arrest puberty, almost always followed with cross-sex hormones. So this language is all very much used, deliberately or not, to be emotive, to be provocative, to instill worry and fear around trans people in the person reading this. So saying that gender affirming care for minors, irreversible sex changes for children, off-label blockers, almost always followed with cross-sex hormones. So firstly, irreversible changes for children, if you constitute a 16 to 18-year-old as a child. Anybody below the age of 18 having access to any kind of irreversible thing, like hormones, is so incredibly rare. So incredibly rare. And the minimum age would be 16. And in the UK, it's 18. You have to be 18 to get hormones. You have to be 18 to have any kind of surgery. So children are not going in and being prescribed testosterone and estrogen and having surgeries. That is not happening to children. Puberty blockers are a medical treatment that have been around for decades. They've been used in cis kids for decades to treat something called precocious puberty, which is where puberty starts too early, and it's deemed safest to pause that puberty until a more appropriate age. Interesting fact, despite all the bans currently going on for puberty blockers for trans kids, there's no ban on puberty blockers for cis kids, despite a lot of the reasons being cited for banning puberty blockers for trans kids being concerns over safety of the use of puberty blockers. The safety of the use of it, not being enough research into the effects it can have on people's bodies, yet they're still being prescribed to cis kids. That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
Unless you then recognize that it's coming from a point of transphobia, then it does make sense. So it's not off-label blockers, it's a well-documented treatment that has been around for a very long time and has been used in trans kids for a really long time. But just as like a point of reference, a study that looked into insurance claims between 2018 and 2022 found that 0.1% of teenagers with private insurance in the US have received gender-related medicine. 0.1%. Trans people are thought of to make up 1% of the population, which means only 10% of those trans people would receive any kind of treatment for being trans before they hit adulthood. To begin with, gays and lesbians, including me, empathise with kids with gender dysphoria and trusted the medical profession with the rest. If this helped kids or even saved their lives, as was often emphasised, what business was it of mine? And that is the opinion that should have been kept. If transitioning this young in life helped some pass better as adults, good for them. Where did this opinion disappear? Still, questions lingered drawn from my own life. As a child, uninterested in playing team sports, but very interested in the boys who played team sports. Oh, this is the classic everybody said, even J.K. Rowling has said this.
If I were a child now, I'd probably be trans.
I was once asked by a girl when I was just 10 years old, "Are you sure you're not really a girl?" "Of course not," I replied. But I wonder how I might have responded if someone in authority, a parent or a teacher or a doctor, has suggested that my difference and occasional anxiety was because I was in fact a girl. Honestly, a doctor or a person of authority would not be suggesting that just because you don't like playing sport. There needs to be a lot more going on, which just shows the great lack of understanding about the gender affirmative approach. That my body was irrelevant and that I could choose to be the opposite sex before puberty and all my confusion would disappear. I just don't know what I would have said or done, to be honest. It's just so insidious, this whole like...
Kids are being plucked out and identified for having very minor non-conforming interests and behaviours and pushed down this path of being trans, and their bodies permanently altered before they know what's happening.
It's literally not happening. That is a fear-mongering lie. And how do today's parents, teachers and doctors know for sure that a 10-year-old child isn't, well, like me and really is trans? Well, they'll be displaying a lot more than just not wanting to play sport. And funnily enough, trans people can be very non-conforming for their gender identity and very conforming for their assigned birth sex, but still be trans and still express being transgender, because it's not all about whether you want to play football or not. It has very little to do with whether you want to play football or not. It has almost nothing to do with whether you want to play football or not. How can they know for sure that gender dysphoria isn't instead a manifestation of being gay or lesbian and wanting to change it? How do they know for sure there isn't another complicating personal or psychological factor? Why not ask these questions of doctors at gender clinics and try and understand more? Why not ask these questions of trans people? Why not ask these questions of parents who support their trans kids? Why not just accept that these are questions that you as a cis person who does not specialize in the medical field of gender dysphoria and treating trans people, why can't you just accept that they are questions that you will likely never fully understand the answers to? I was told not to worry. A child had to demonstrate a persistent, consistent and insistent trans identity for years even to be considered for medical intervention. So why the concern? But this, I found out, was no longer true. The whole point of the new regime of gender affirming care was that it rejected broad mental health assessments of children that could ensure that mistakes really didn't happen. The old persistent, consistent and insistent model was deemed transphobic and loosened to become an affirmation policy. As soon as kids said he or she was the opposite sex, further counselling and mental health exploration was deemed problematic because it amounted to transphobic conversion therapy, we were told. Certain certain types of further conversations and therapies are seen as conversion therapy. So like if a child were to go in who was assigned male at birth and was like, I would like to go by this name and I would like to use she, her pronouns, and I want to wear these clothes and this is how I want to be viewed and this is how I feel, what would actually happen is further conversation, further appointments, further discussions with both the child and family members as to how they're feeling, what they want to do. It's just a child-led approach, because what happened in terms of like this other counseling and blah blah blah, I think he's referring to reparative therapy, where the child would be actively encouraged to not explore their expression and told, no, as a boy child,
You must wear these clothes. You cannot change your name. You cannot go by these pronouns. You cannot grow your hair long. You must play with the other boys. You must play sports.
is pushing the child into something that they have expressed themselves not wanting to do. So children do still have appointments. They do still speak to counselors. They just do not speak to people who are going to basically perform conversion therapy on them. When I said that seemed crazy and surely we need more safeguards, I was certainly told children know who they are. Well, we trust cis kids, don't we? But do they when they're between 9 and 13? I sure didn't. You had no inclination whatsoever that you were a boy. Really. Does any parent really believe this? Solid long-term data on how many children who transition but decide later it was a mistake is hard to find, in large part because the procedures are relatively new and the studies often have very poor follow-up. But without a doubt there are some. They're walking around today testifying in courts and legislators, opening all over the web, telling similar stories of rush judgments, minimal safeguards, inadequate gatekeeping, and agonizing regret that as children they made irreversible decisions that they could not meaningfully consent to. That's speaking about the 2 or 3 people on this cycle that are used as the poster kids of like detransitioners, but ignoring the actual research that shows a 97.5% persistent rate out of 5-year follow-up. There are multiple studies that solidly show persistence in gender dysphoria among a majority of kids who come in to speak to gender identity clinics. You could probably find a handful of kids who felt like they received other types of medical care as a child that they regret because it's impacted their life as an adult. But we don't see that plastered as a reason for all of the many kids and all of the 99% of kids where it's absolutely the right thing and they have no regrets about doing that. We don't see it being used as a reason to no longer do that medical treatment, but we do when it comes to trans people because there's a double standard. In the Netherlands, the famous Dutch protocol for gender affirming care was pioneered in the 1990s with far stricter safeguards in place than exist in the United States today. There, of a cohort of 70 adolescents referred to an Amsterdam clinic from 2000-2008, 62 were same-sex attracted, and it's easy to see that one way to cure yourself of attraction to the same sex is to become the opposite sex. I'm not sure where this notion started that it's easier to be trans than to be gay. This is a really weird argument we see from some transphobic gay people of like,
Oh, it's all the lesbians are disappearing because they're transing.
what? There's literal like studies showing that most trans people post-transition, as in for their gender identity, are not straight. It's not like every trans man who transitioned identified as a lesbian beforehand and now identifies as a straight man. Actually, most trans men do not identify as straight. The same goes for the trans community as a whole. Most do not identify as straight. We were also told repeatedly that transitioning children was drastic. Transitioning children. Again, it's this language that makes it sound like something that these kids are forced into when they are not being forced into it. The transitioning children was drastic, but the alternative could be that they would commit suicide. We often ask parents, would you rather have a dead son than a live daughter? Joanna Olson Kennedy, a vocal advocate of these treatments, told ABC News in 2011. But even the American Civil Liberties Union, Mr. Strangio, admitted when arguing before the Supreme Court last year that suicide thankfully and admittedly is rare. But it's ideation, it's levels of depression, it's attempts. These studies are very rarely looking at the data on people who have actually done this, but they're looking at the data of people who have considered suicide or attempted suicide. And transitioning does reduce risk because it increases mental well-being. He speaks some more about like issues with gender affirmative approach and problems people have with it and one-off cases where it's not worked out for somebody. It's just still very exhausting and I feel like it's stuff I've already gone over. It's a horrible reversal of history. For so long, First Amendment rights were the primary constitutional right gays and lesbians could fully and regularly exercise, and we treasured them. If censorship was in the air, gay men and lesbians were the first to oppose it. We knew who was shut up first when it came to shutting people up, and we knew we would always be a small minority. The idea that we would tell other people what words they can use, shut down speakers, criticize journalists, and threaten others into silence was once absurd. Yet these are now the signature tools of the LGBTQ movement. They do not seek to engage or persuade opponents, they seek to demonize, bully, or cancel them. The amount of damage that's been caused by the media and by deliberate lies, and there are lies in this article as well, the amount of damage that's been caused to the trans community in particular by those lies is ridiculous. It is one of the the driving forces behind all of the transphobia right now. Look at the amount of harm that people like J.K. Rowling have caused, and that is all by the spreading of misinformation and fearmongering around the trans community. Of course that's going to get called out. Of course nobody would think it was a sensible idea to just let rich, powerful politicians and billionaires and celebrities carry on running their mouths off, going on some bizarre tirade of transphobia without anybody calling it out. Freedom of speech, but it's not freedom of consequence. Or take the campaign for marriage equality. We were almost pathologically civil, willing to debate anyone anywhere, and the harder the nut to crack, the better. For 2 decades, I went to fundamentalist churches in Idaho, Mormon groups, Catholic universities, conservative media, right-wing talk shows, and C-SPAN, and published an anthology that included views from both sides. We knew that if we wanted to win and not just posture, we needed to reach conservatives and moderates and explore where we might agree, and it worked. He speaks about how slowly but surely they made progress over 2 decades and got through to people, and their marriage equality was, yay, happened. Trans people aren't even at the point of being able to have these conversations though. And trans people do go on and debate our rights to exist with bigots on TV shows, in the media, but rarely are we given these opportunities to actually speak. I have tried myself and have been met with brick wall after brick wall of a person who is either abhorrent to my face or just sits there, nods, says some really bad bullshit, and then turns around and is literally saying the exact opposite to what I said to them. They do not listen. We are not at the point where people are actively listening. But I've said it already, I get very frustrated when people try and state that the gay rights movement has been nothing but civil and has just been like, oh look, we were just chatting and we did it slowly but surely over the year. It wasn't just that. Just because you had the privilege to actually sit in those rooms and get on those stages and speak to those people doesn't mean that's what it was like for everybody. Then he goes on to say that he tries to blame the way the trans community is trying to get equal rights is why people are becoming less accepting. He said that it's not bigotry at work. And he said a solid majority, 56%, favour policies protecting trans people from discrimination. I wouldn't call 56% a solid majority. So he said Americans are broadly fine with transgender people. They're fine with gay people. They just reject replacing the fact of biological sex with the phantasms of gender ideology. They have bought in to a transphobic lie that is being spread by the media, by people who get to write New York opinion pieces. It's very difficult to push back against that as a community who very rarely gets any kind of platform whatsoever. And then he spends a couple paragraphs that feels like just more blaming of the trans community for why people are transphobic. It's not bigotry, it's because you're asking too much. You're not asking in the right way. The intransigence matters because left on its current trajectory, the LGBTQ gender movement carries significant risks for gay, lesbian, and trans equality. Gallup found that a satisfaction with the acceptance of gay and lesbian people peaked at 62% in 2022 but dropped to 51% in January of this year. People in the centre and on the right, whom some of us have spent a lifetime engaging, are being lost. Gallup showed Republican support for gay marriage dropping from 55% in 2022 to 41% in 2025. Again, this is not the fault of trans people. Why are we blaming a marginalised community? Trans people are not that powerful. It's bigots that have made us sound like this great, big, scary, powerful community, and then they are spreading the lies to make us sound big and powerful, and then also spreading the lies to reduce people's acceptance of us. And people have literally bought into that and are like,
oh yeah, it's the trans people's fault. It's why people are being transphobic.
Returning to a civil rights model and abandoning the quixotic attempt to end the sex binary do not mean, as some might have it, throwing trans people under the bus. Trans people are already on the bus, mate. Trans people are clinging on for dear life on the back of the bus while transphobic gay people are bashing our hands to let go. They are protected from employment discrimination under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Oh woo, but in some states can't piss in the toilet that matches their gender identity. Don't have equal access to healthcare. Face way higher rates of violence than cis people. Their existing rights should be defended and expanded to public accommodations, especially the adult right to have access to gender medicine through Medicaid, which is now being threatened. Americans should back us on that, but fighting a losing battle to allow trans women to compete in women's sports, for biological men to be in women's intimate spaces, and to perpetuate risky, inadequately tested sex changes on children, including gay and lesbian ones, is dumb, offensive to common sense, and risks a much bigger backlash. You do know that, like, all these things, so like trans women competing in women's sports is not new. It's not a new thing that trans people are pushing for. It is just what transphobes have decided to highlight. So trans women have been able to compete in the women's category at Olympic level, literally at the Olympic Games, since 2004. In that time, only 2 openly trans women have actually competed, and none of them have won medals. This is a total non-issue that bigots have made into a problem. It is not something that trans people were standing there campaigning for. It's something that bigots have turned around and decided that after 2 decades of it being perfectly okay and causing 0 issues for anybody, bigots have decided to have a problem with it. And so of course trans people are going to be like, hey, but we've had this right. We do have a right to compete. Why are you trying to take away this right that we already have? So stop making it sound like this is all just
made up bullshit
from trans people. This does not mean the LGBTQ project should be shut down entirely. We need to defend our wins. We need to protect the interests of gay, lesbians, and trans people. We need to greatly expand help and care for children with gender dysphoria, prevent bullying and increase mental health resources. Protecting them from often irreversible sex changes should not mean abandoning them. It should mean renewed concern, support, and above all, solid evidence-based research on how we can best help. There is solid evidence-based research on how to best help. Children not having sex changes. That's so archaic. That's such a dumb thing to have bought into. Children who are receiving gender affirming care are receiving care that is solid and evidence based. I don't know what this person's idea of solid evidence based care would look like for trans kids. But in America, on this anniversary of the Obergefell decision, we also need to remember a critical thing. We won. We won because we defended free speech, reached out to right and left and centre, left others and children alone, and trusted liberal democracy. That trust was rewarded with one of the swiftest successes in civil rights history. Let's not throw it away. This is just somebody going like,
oh, because trans people want rights, I feel like my rights might be threatened now. I'm okay, don't take away my right. Like, no, we don't need any more. Shut up, shush.
It just feels like the person in a movie who gets to safety and then kicks their friend out in front of the killer because they're like, I'm safe, we don't need any more safe people, I'm good, so you go, I'm sacrificing you. That's how it comes across. And the gay rights movement was not quiet and polite. It was loud, and it was seen as radical, and it was revolutionary, and it was a protest. First Pride was a protest. So to try and blame trans people for the lies and manipulation coming from bigots and for the transphobia that we are facing at the minute is entirely atrocious. And let's literally just reframe that article as if it had been written by a straight person who's trying to act like they support gay people, but actually it's just full of anti-gay rhetoric and homophobia and saying like,
oh, but like we gave women their rights and we got rid of segregation for people of colour. So why are we now going after gay marriage? Why do gay people need to get married? Why do gay people need to have protections in the workplace? Why do gay people need this and that? Like they can live with their partner now, can't they? They can get jobs, can't they? That's good enough. Stop going after it, because what if they come after other people? Stop it. Gays are good. They got enough. They're like 10% of equal rights is good enough for them. Like,
that was exhausting. I actually need to go get 8 hours of sleep and maybe put on some more eye patches. Anyway, if you want a skincare routine to recover from this article, go click the link in the description box. It also supports me if you want to go check it out. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Think about giving a thumbs up and subscribing if you want to, but no pressure. You'll see some names going up the screen. These are my lovely Patreons who go support me over there. And I want to give a big shout out to my top tier Patreons. Ginger Blues, Albar, Bildad the Shoeite, yes, Chloe, Dallin Irving, Elden K, Gosco, Iona Balash, Jesse Entwistle, Marv Mallow, Max Makes Mods, Night Soul, Nesta, Rachel Raptor, Randy, Riley Ray, River Champignon, Sally Drew, Sarah Hobbs, Sienna Lamb, Slayer, Spring Metal Dragon, Sugar Joe, TNS Mum, The Paisley Prince, and The Third Hat Man. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you at least learned something, even if you didn't enjoy it that much, because it was a difficult one. Thanks for sticking with it if you have stuck to it to the end. I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.